Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supergirl, Lucifer, and Gotham. Now, let's first start off with Supergirl. It picks kind of where the last episode in it, the city's still not trusting Kara, Supergirl, because she even tried stopping a bank robbery, but people were still terrified of her. And I love Kat's opinion on the whole thing. She's like, okay, is this city stupid or what? We obviously know something was wrong with Supergirl, yet no, the world still hasn't forgiven her. I mean, granted, that's saying a lot coming from Kat. Kat was the one that was thrown off a building and, almost killed. If she can forgive Supergirl, I think the rest of you can forgive Supergirl too. But that's whatever. This episode was specifically John Jones centered because we found out a little bit more about his past. I mean, and a tiny bit about Kara and Alex's. In John's past, we kind of see that whole thing that went down 10 years ago where Alex and Kara's dad, Jeremiah, died. Basically, Hank, the real Hank, brought a whole team there. Him and some people in the DEO, as well as Jeremiah, came there for the purpose of killing this alien that they were to track down. Granted, Jeremiah wasn't really all thrilled about okay, we don't have to kill him. We could, learn from him because, you end up finding out present day, obviously he was probably a little bit younger then, but present day, because I never knew this about John Jones either. It's he's 300 years old. Never knew that about him. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that ever really came up in anything I've ever saw before of that featured the Martian Manhunter. I don't think that ever came up how old he actually is. But Jeremiah ends up running into John and they end up bonding, creating a friendship. Because he's he learns about John and John learns about Jeremiah. They bond over the fact that they're both fathers, He tells him I'm from Mars, that he's a Martian, that he had a family. He had 2 little girls of his own that died. Basically what happened was, the reason why Jeremiah died, because, they were asking, the colonel that was, interrogating him was asking him what happened to Jeremiah? And he was what happened to Jeremiah as well as the real Hank Henshaw? And basically what happened was it was a struggle and Jeremiah was trying to protect John and ended up getting stabbed and dying, and Hank ended up falling off a cliff as a result of the whole struggle. We also have Alex's, when she's being interrogated, a story coming up about her that basically she was a party girl and that John kind of gave her a purpose. That's why she respects him so much. That's why, finding out he was an alien didn't change her opinion on him, because he was still the man that brought her in. Because, she kind of was a little bit out of control just because of the sole purpose of, and it's very interesting. It was brought up kind of last episode, about her being, a little jealous of Kara, and they kind of reiterate that in this flashback scene when you find out, she kind of was a bit of a party girl just because she was kind of in the mindset of well, what's the point? My sister's better than me. How could I ever compare to a girl who can do anything? Which is kind of sad to think like that. But I mean, that's how she felt. But John was no, you have to live up to your potential, not just for yourself, but also for your dad. That was kind of neat. Even from the very beginning, he's always stepped into that father role, And Lucy kind of calls her out on it. You've always thought of him as a father, so obviously you're going to sit here and lie and say that you never knew that John Jones was a alien at any point in time. So, but it ended up being dragged off. Alex and John end up getting dragged off to some place called Cadmus Labs, which sounds so familiar. I don't know whether it's something I remember from Smallville or whether that's something from any DC animated shows or whatever. Maybe it's actually both. I don't know. It just sounds very familiar to me. But basically it's a place where aliens are taken to be dissected and examined. Supergirl and Jimmy kind of go to Lucy, specifically Kara, not Supergirl, because, they bring her over to Kara's apartment, which, Lucy's of course I'd find you over here at, of course you'd invite me over to Kara's apartment. This would be where we were. But that's where Kara reveals, to Lucy that that she's Supergirl, and then Lucy's kind of like shocked, but then she's more than shocked. She's pissed because she's like, now it all makes sense. Why you're so close to Supergirl. Well, it turns out that Supergirl is the same girl it's the same person as the girl that you're in love with, so it all makes sense now. She's like, I kind of feel bad for Lucy because she always felt like she took second place to like Superman, and then with Supergirl in the limelight, Supergirl being in Jimmy's life, it's like, okay, now there's a female version of the superhero that you kind of picked over me, but now to find out that the reason why is because that same person is the girl you're in love with. It's just she can't win. You're in love with this other person that you tell all these other things to, and just to find out on top of that she's Supergirl's hero, it's just kind of like, it's kind of probably a lot to take in. So I feel a little bad for her. But at that time, to convince Lucy, to help them rescue John and Alex, she kind of tells a story about when she was younger, and this was like when she was telling a story like of when she first came to Earth, like it's specifically on like her first day of school, and that her senses were kind of overwhelmed, which is something I never knew was a thing until Man of Steel. I don't think I ever really remember that coming up, them growing up and the yellow sun hitting them, and it just overloads their senses at first. Didn't know that until like I watched Man of Steel. Her X-ray vision was going off, her superhearing was going off. Basically, during the situation at the beach, because she was hanging out with her sis and her friend, and Alex is kind of like, stop being weird. She's like, I can't help it. We don't have birds on Krypton. And Alex is like, shut up, don't say stuff like that out loud. There's a lady that was in a car crash, and Kara ran over and saved her. I mean, no one saw exactly what she did, but she saved the woman and she saved her baby. And, eventually, Jeremiah kind of had to answer questions about that. Obviously, he said it was luck, but he's like, that's not going to bode well for long. He's like, there's already one Superman on this planet. You just have to be you. Just be my daughter. And that's kind of sweet. It's just like, we already got one superhero out. We already got one Superman out there. You don't have to be a super person too. You can just be my little girl. And it was kind of sweet. He handed her a pair of glasses, apparently that are lined with lead. Never crossed my mind that those glasses are somewhat special. To me, I always just assumed they were just regular glasses, but no, apparently they're lined with lead because it was meant to help her control her powers at the time. And now I guess she kind of wears them in second nature like Clark does, as part of her disguise. But apparently they are still lined with lead, because when she was doing her interview for Kat, which I really liked, because Kat was like, oh, not a millennial. And then she's like, oh, you always come in here thinking you're special. And Kara's like, no, I'm not special. I'm not special at all. I'm just plain. I'm average. I'm just the most average person ever. I'm nothing special about me at all. And Kat's kind of surprised. It's like, it worked in her favor. The fact is that she's trying so hard to appear normal, she just ends up seeming like a very self-deprecating person. But what I was getting at is the fact is that she lowered her glasses to use her X-ray vision, which I never honestly paid too much attention to that. But now it makes more sense why she did that. It's just like, okay, because the glasses are lined with lead. I mean, is that something she still, is that something that's canon? Because I always assumed the glasses were just regular glasses. Side note, I didn't even know Kara wore glasses. I just thought that was just a Clark thing. I guess it's because, honestly, prior to this, I didn't know she kind of had the whole secret identity thing, too. I thought she was just kind of out in the open as Supergirl. I didn't know she actually had a day job like Clark does. But that was kind of interesting. And, she kind of talks to Lucy. But after that story, she tells Lucy, in her case, in John's case, they both lost their homes and they found themselves in a weird world, like a world they don't know anything about. They just wanted to find their place in it. And that she's like, the whole reason why I'm telling you, Lucy, is because I can trust you. I know what kind of person you are. And so Lucy and Kara work together. They end up rescuing Hank and Alex. And Hank ends up wiping the Colonel's memory. Alex was like, wait, but Hank was like, no, don't worry about it. I mean, I keep calling him. John was like, don't worry, I've gotten better at this. Ends up wiping his memory. of like, this whole day. But at the time of him doing that, he ended up seeing Jeremiah and ended up finding out that Jeremiah is still alive and he's being held at Cadmus Labs. So him and Alex are going off to, find him. Which Alex kind of says her goodbyes to Kara because it's, she's a fugitive now for breaking out her and John. So she can't stay around anymore. It's kind of sad because, Kara's like, I need you. And Alex is like, you've never needed me. And it's like, it's just, y'all need each other because together y'all make, the perfect team. But but they went off to find Jeremiah. Apparently, while John was in the Colonel's head, he ends up making him make the decision to make Lucy the new head of the DEO. So that's going to be really interesting, having Lucy as Kara's new boss. They're at a point where they're good. They're not, at odds anymore. So there's that. But it would be interesting to see like whether that play conflict in the future, especially, maybe something happens and Jimmy gets involved in something and, she kind of holds that against Kara. Another thing that happened this episode, we had Siobhan kind of like being super pissed about the whole getting fired thing, because apparently she can't get a job anywhere because the moment she mentions her name, everyone's like, oh, never mind, forget it. Kat basically ruined her life, and side note, Kara did. And then Wynn was kind of there with her, like, you shouldn't hold that against her. She's like, no, it was definitely Kara who did it. So basically, she snuck into Kat code. She typed an email from Kara's computer and sent it to Kat. It was apparently a very nasty email. And then, Kat calls Siobhan in, and Siobhan's kind of like, oh, I wonder what you're calling me in for. And it's like, yeah. And then Kat was like, yeah, she ended up sending me this very nasty email. And then, but she's like, yeah, apparently it wasn't Kara though. And then apparently Wynn had sold her out because Wynn had, looked at the, did his tech thing and proved that it wasn't Kara who sent it, that it was Siobhan. It's like, wow, turning against your, I don't really know what to refer those two as because they're not, I doubt it's a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. I mean, at that point of a relationship, but basically he backstabbed her, and then Siobhan went to the roof and got super drunk. She's like, you're supposed to have my back, Wynn. I thought you were on my side, but Wynn's like, she's my friend. I'm not going to let you, like, try and destroy my friend's career. And then Siobhan's just so upset about it. She's, like, backing up, and she ends up falling off the edge. And then Wynn tries, runs over to stop her from falling, but she ends up falling, and while she's falling, she's screaming, and like her voice vibrates, and it's slowing her down and stopping her from smacking the ground. And it's like, holy crap, she has powers too, which is like, where did that come from? And it kind of comes as no surprise to me. It's slightly like about her having powers did come as surprise because I kind of already know, like, to anyone that doesn't know that I already got it spoiled for me that comic book wise, that she's a bad guy. Just like apparently Wynn is actually a bad guy comic book wise. But I kind of already got it spoiled because someone had mentioned the fact is that a supervillain named Banshee was showing up, and I was like, oh, you're actually that, because I never knew who she was, and I never bothered looking it up, but now I see it's like, oh, that's who you are. I see the whole screaming power, like you're like a banshee. So I think I even saw a photo of what she looked like as herself. So it's like, I'm curious to see like where that goes, like how she transitions from being a little bit bitchy to a supervillain, and how she ends up turning out to look the way she does later on in the episode. But I'm curious, like, where did that power come from? Like, what gave her powers? I guess we just won't find out until the next episode. Which, interestingly enough, the next episode of this is the Flash Supergirl crossover. So I'm super excited about that. Cannot wait. Because I remember that from the cartoon. Because apparently the big part of it is, like, who's faster, Supergirl or the Flash? I mean, Superman and the Flash. But, it's kind of like a because I saw like the cartoon of Superman back in the day where it was basically it was like a big thing, like everyone showed up to see the race between the Flash and Superman. I remember that being an episode. Like, granted, you never actually saw who the winner was because at the end of the episode they're continuing the race because the episode was them dealing with a problem together. But nevertheless, it's going to be pretty interesting to see that, and I think that might actually play a big part in Kara trying to get back the city's, favorable opinion. Now moving on to this week's episode of Lucifer, we have Lucifer being visited by a priest. Basically, the priest wants Lucifer's help in stopping a local, drug dealer who is bringing in the youth, like kids at a youth center. He's bringing them in as possible people to work for him. There's one particular kid named Connor that the priest, what was his name again? Okay, it's Father Frank. Basically, Father Frank wanted him to, protect this kid named Connor. And apparently him and Connor have a connection. You end up finding out that basically the same accident that killed Connor's parents also killed his little, Father Frank's little girl. That's kind of why he takes such a, he latches on to Connor so badly. Just because it's like, he looks at, he looked at it as his responsibility to look after Connor since Connor has no one in the world. But I really liked in this episode that basically the entire time, Lucifer being who he is, doesn't like priests, and he's just like, he wants to convince Chloe so bad. He's like, obviously Franks is the one that killed this drug dealer. He talked about he had the desire to want to punch him and shove his fist through his face. So obviously it was him. He's like, let's go prove it was him. Granted, though, the priest has an alibi because he was taken to confession of that lady. The same lady that Lucifer had snuck into confessional booth was talking to. Because she's like, Father, I'm having these thoughts about another man. And Lucifer's like, who cares? Dive into it a little bit. She's like, who's this other guy? And she's like, it's my husband's limo driver. She's like, no, if you didn't want to act upon those desires, you wouldn't be thinking about it. If you really didn't want to be mixed up with someone else, you wouldn't be having these very naughty thoughts about your husband's limo driver. And he was just having so much fun with that. But, he even made a joke when they found out about the priest's alibi. He's like, maybe he has a twin brother and we can find out that he's guilty that way. Make him guilty by association that his twin brother's the one that went off and killed the guy. It's like, that's a really big stretch right there, Lucifer coming up with that. But basically the priest is being shot at and, Lucifer takes him to his club, to kind of keep him safe. Very interestingly enough, they end up bonding actually a little bit. Because Lucifer is like questions like, how can you have so much faith in a man that took away your daughter? Because Father Frank was like, he wasn't initially, obviously he's like, no one starts off a priest. He's like, I have my very checkered past. I have my very checkered past, but he found his way to God, and it kind of, gave him a purpose, set him on the right path. And Lucifer just doesn't get, he's like, he took your daughter away from you, yet you serve him so willingly. But even with that difference of opinion, they end up sitting down, playing the piano together, and they were just having so much fun. It's very interesting because, Dr. Martin had brought it up earlier in the episode that Lucifer is lonely. He may not be alone. Being alone and being lonely are two different things, because the fact is, does Lucifer actually have any friends? She's like, what about Chloe? Detective Decker, do you consider her a friend? And he's like, honestly, I don't know what we are. But they had so much fun. Even had Chloe teasing him about how much fun he had with the priest. It's like, you actually like the guy whether you admit it or not. But basically, you end up finding out that the one that killed him was this counselor named, one of the counselors that you met at the beginning of the episode. It looked like everything was pointing towards Connor being like this new drug dealer named Spider who took over that dead drug dealer's business, but it was actually one of the counselors. And he actually was telling Connor to kill Father Frank, but Connor didn't want to. And, at the last moment, the counselor tries to shoot him, but, Father Frank gets in the way and ends up dying. He ends up, bleeding out. And Lucifer's there. It's like, you idiot, why did you do that? And apparently he knew who Lucifer was the entire time. He's like, I always thought I was, you were put here, on my path. Maybe I was put here in yours. Because he had basically told Lucifer something very interesting that, that God basically has a plan for them all. And then, it's like, how can, because that's whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. He's like, honestly, I already know about my dad's plan for me. My dad's plan was, put me in a position I was in. And then Father Frank presented something to him. He's like, well, how do you know that your father, how do you know God's plan, God is done with you, done unveiling his plan? But the whole situation, it kind of like, it was like really sad because like he was actually hurt by it. He's like, no, don't die, please don't. But he did. And he just flew into a rage and went over and almost killed the guy. But Chloe told him not to. And at the very end, like, even Chloe was like, are you okay? And Lucifer said, yeah. And he just walked away. Normally, he may be making some wisecrack like that at the very end, but he doesn't. He just walks away, and Chloe just sees how sad he is. And she actually shows up at the club to keep him company. She's like, that's what a friend is for. And it's kind of like, oh. It's very interesting, like their like that dynamic of just Lucifer being 100% against a priest, yet that ends up being someone he feels closest to. And, he had, like I said, it's kind of interesting how that came full circle for Lucifer, him being lonely. And he actually kind of made a friend when it came to the priest, as well as, defining his relationship with Chloe. And they kind of have a friendship. It's very interesting when Lucifer is always constantly changing, because I doubt who Lucifer originally would ever have been friends with a priest. I mean, obviously you see that at the beginning, but it's like he actually came to like and respect the guy. It's just, I don't know, it's so interesting. And we also get another side of this episode where we, Malcolm, the dirty cop. Still, I don't know that situation. Is he really a dirty cop? Was it what he told Chloe about him, looking into a dirty cop? Was that BS, or is he legitimately a dirty cop? It seems like he's legitimately a dirty cop. Basically, he partners himself up with Dan because he knows that Dan was going to try and tell Chloe the truth. He's like, this way I can keep an eye on you, that if you try, I'm going to take you down, with me. If I go down, I'm going to take you down with me, type of thing. Especially, because Dan's in a position where he's trying to repair his relationship with Chloe. Basically, Malcolm has Dan do something for him, and that's remove something from evidence. It's particularly a gun from evidence. And you end up finding out why, though, because apparently Amenadol, the reason why he brought him back is because they're working together. He apparently pulled him from hell. That was kind of interesting. It's like, I bet you those 30 seconds you spend in hell for like 30 years, I can easily put you back. Okay. Basically, this whole thing is him getting someone, a pawn, to kill Lucifer. Which is like, can you really call yourself an angel at this point? You are manipulating someone to try and kill your brother. Granted, I get why you're trying to, do that, but it's like, I'm really interested to see where this whole Amenadol thing goes, because I feel like in the end, we're going to get a role reversal where it's like Lucifer is actually more of a good guy than Amenadol is. Maybe they'll end up switching spots, and Amenadol is the one that gets, torn down, and he ends up becoming like the next Lucifer or something like that. I don't know. It's like I can't believe an angel is coming up with a plan to kill someone. He's like, the whole reason why he brought Malcolm back was for the sole purpose of killing Lucifer. He needed a pawn. It's like, man, you are really, it's kind of sad that you're so dead set on killing your brother. I mean, granted, we already know why, obviously, because he needs Lucifer to die so that he can go back to hell. But it's like, apparently he can't do it, because I guess he's trying to keep his like righteousness by not killing Lucifer himself. Maybe, I don't know, because I mean, you were able to beat on Lucifer pretty hard when Lucifer burned his wings. So it's like, I don't see too much of a stretch of you like killing him, like manipulating someone to kill him. It's like, how do you not think God sees you doing what you're doing? And like, how do you think, maybe he actually legitimately thinks he's going to get away with it. Maybe he actually thinks he's doing the right thing, and that's just kind of more twisted, At least Lucifer's upfront with his intentions. He doesn't pretend to be anything but who he is. It's like, Amenadol, you're playing both sides. You're doing these dark acts while pretending to be in the light, Very, very interesting developments. Finally, moving on to this episode of Gotham, we have, Nigma stepping up his Riddler game. in the beginning, he's just stealing a painting, which is like the first step in many in this episode, leading to, him playing. It's just a long line of riddles and twists and turns that, basically Bullock and Gordon are investigating the whole situation. And, you have Nigma there being on the scene as well. I always like that in stories when like the bad guy is actually a part of, like, he may not be a cop, but he's connected to the cops, so he can be on a crime scene. I always like that aspect in like crime shows and stuff like that. But that's just me. In this episode, we also have the whole investigation into Gordon being reopened about the whole Gallivant situation, because apparently someone came forward about being there and gave details that they shouldn't know. Now, initially I was thinking like, oh, Penguin, but then it's like, no, Penguin being the way he is now in his quote unquote cured state, there's no way he did that. Then I was like, maybe it was Strange, because Strange knows that Gordon killed Gallivant, but granted, he wouldn't know all the details because Penguin didn't spill all the details. Not unless Penguin did, at some point during his therapy. And speaking of Penguin, it's very interesting this episode because he went to apologize to Butch. Gallivant's sister was there, which is like, still find that weird. We haven't really seen what they're up to. We just know that, obviously they're kind of a thing and they're partners leading everything. But, Penguin was there. He's actually there apologizing for what he did. Gallivant's sister wants to kill him, but Butch is like, nah, let him go. He's not the same man. I actually kind of feel bad for him because he's like a pathetic, weakling now. He even went to Nigma later on in the episode. Like, you should stop this violence. It's not a good thing. But then, Nigma says, I'm sorry. It's good seeing you, my friend. But then later on in the episode, Penguin ends up, visiting his mom's grave and ends up running into the guy that's his father, played by Paul Rubin. Freaking Pee Wee Herman, dude. His dad is freaking Pee Wee Herman. I mean, obviously not. But basically, you find out the reason why he wasn't in Penguin's life, because he didn't know that Penguin's mom was pregnant. He was in love with her, but he came from a very high class, like social class family, and they didn't improve his relationship. Basically, he regrets not standing up to his parents. Like, he tried to, but he failed miserably at it. So he's like, that's one regret, is that he didn't stand up to his parents more, especially because he didn't know she was pregnant. If he had known, he probably would have. But he welcomes Penguin into his family, and it turns out, he has like other people in his family, and they're just kind of like, oh yeah, welcome, brother. But you can see the like disgust in their face. So I'm already saying it right here and now. They're after their father's money. I don't know whether that's necessarily their father. I'm assuming like two of the youngest people are his children, and the lady is his wife. But basically, they're after his money, and now that that Penguin is back in his life, that leads him to be the heir. He could be another potential heir. So they're going to try their best. Everyone's going to try their best to get rid of Penguin. So that's how I'm foreseeing that. I'm think they're going to actually try and kill him at some point. I'm calling it right now, just because I can see it in their faces. They're going to try and kill him, because him being there is going to interfere with their chances of getting any money, when Penguin's dad finally dies, because if he's there, that means he gets a piece of the inheritance or whatever. And another thing that went down was Bruce and Selena still, Bruce still living with Selena, ended up meeting up with Ivy, who's apparently growing these special mushrooms for this gang, and she ends up put some in their food or their drinks or something, and it basically puts them in like a dreamlike state. Selena and Bruce go to try and rob them, but end up getting caught. Basically, the guy is like the guy that caught them. It's like the nephew of a big mobster or something, and it seems like he's about to beat up on Selena, because she's kind of running her mouth. But then Bruce kind of runs his mouth and calls him a coward and stuff, and he's like starts beating on Bruce, and he beats on Bruce hard, dude. Like, messes him pretty hard. I was not expecting it. Like, he did like a gut punch. I was like, okay, after that, he beat him up hard. Like, left him with like a big bruise on his eye, like bloodied up mouth and everything. But Bruce did end up landing some good hits later on in that fight. So I thought that was pretty cool. He ends up going to Selena. I mean, Selena ends up patching him up a little bit, like stitching a little bit above his eye. And then he actually said, like, after, Bruce ends up talking about the fact is, everything that he's been through in that moment when he was getting beat up, he's like, it made him kind of forget about everything else. Everything else kind of fell to the wayside. The only thing that was on his mind, that he knew he was going to be okay, that he felt unbreakable. But Selena's like, Bruce, no one's unbreakable. But basically, let's get back to like the main thing in this episode, and that was the whole Riddler situation. Man, oh man, did Nigma set Gordon up hard. Basically, everything was for the sole purpose of framing Jim for like all these murder. Like there was like, Nigma ends up murdering a cop. I mean, he does it pretty brutally too. He ends up taking the crowbar that Jim had used to open that locker at the train station when he was disposing of the bomb. He took that very crowbar and started beating that cop down with, and left it there. And basically, Harvey had, on his side, had traced a call, to the bomb, because basically the bomb was being controlled remotely. So it was like they end up tracing a call that's connected to everything back to that apartment building. Jim didn't realize it was that apartment building of the that cop. His captain ends up showing up thinking Jim did it, because basically all the evidence has been laid out. Nigma tricked the cop into signing a form. It was basically the anonymous, the person who anonymously tipped about the whole Gordon and Gallivan situation. So, which means Nigma was the one who ratted him out. I guess Nigma kind of got all the details from Penguin. Maybe that's how. I don't know. Not unless that was someone else entirely, and Nigma just took the opportunity. I don't know. I feel like that's just too good of well timing. So I believe it's probably Nigma who was the anonymous tipper anyway about like the whole situation. But man, he set him apart, and even the captain's like, "You disgust me. You're not even, you were once a good man, but you've fallen so hard now." And basically, Gordon ends up, going to jail for it. I mean, they end up finding him guilty, sending him to jail. I think it was like 40 years. Harvey obviously still believes that he's innocent and is trying to prove his innocence. But, Lee visits him, and she's like, okay, how are we going to fight this? And Jim's like, we're not going to fight this. There is no we in this. Go off, live your life. You have a daughter to look after. Lee's like, it's our daughter. She's like, don't do this, Jim. He's like, don't visit me anymore. Go live your life. Get as far away from me and Gotham as you can. Basically regretting not going with her when, leaving like she wanted to originally. He tried to fix everything, but he couldn't. So, and basically at the very end, like I said, he's being sent in prison, and he says to Harvey, like, you were always a good partner, Harvey. And he's like, still is, because he's still looking into it. And it's like, dude, this show, I don't care what anyone says, it always catches me off guard. I was not expecting, like, because it's like you already have this mindset of who Jim Gordon is. Obviously, he's going to have some bumps along the road, but man, actually going to prison, actually killing Gallivan, did not expect those twists and turns, but it's like, holy crap, he's actually locked up. And I'm quite interested to see, like, how that whole situation is going to get handled, because Nigma played him hard, set him up hard. That was crazy. But that's really all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.